What is your reaction to the president of Mexico, Lopez Obrador, endorsing your Democrat opponent, Beto O'Rourke, in the governor's race this November? Obviously, this is Joe Biden's pick. Now you've got the president of Mexico endorsing Beto O'Rourke.
There's a reason for it, and that is all of these illegal immigrants coming from Mexico into Texas, they are allowed into Mexico by President Lopez Obrador. And they're coming from countries across the entire world. For one, President Lopez Obrador, he could keep them out of Mexico if he wanted to, but he does not want to. He wants to funnel them into the state of Texas. Maria, can you imagine anything worse in the United States of America than having Lopez Obrador working with Joe Biden, working with Beto O'Rourke, those three with the open border policies? My fellow Americans, it would be a disaster, a crushing disaster from which we may never recover if Beto O'Rourke were working hand in hand with Joe Biden and the president of Mexico on open border policies in the state of Texas. It would destroy our country.
You know, I really appreciate that the president of Mexico is backing Beto O'Rourke, because I'm sure he understands, the president understands kind of the sway that he could have by virtue of the fact that Texas has gained almost 9 Hispanic residents for every additional white resident. And that was in 2019. And that's not to say that all Hispanic residents in Texas are of Mexican origin, but hopefully the number there and the populace there will somewhat be persuaded by the Mexican president, recognizing that Beto O'Rourke is the better bet as a leader there in Texas. And hey, with all the heat waves and the lack of the energy going on in Texas, you think that the people who live there would also recognize that Greg Abbott ain't it. Because the Texas governor, well, he has to pull these tropes out in order to try to stay in his position of power. He's warning against an invasion of migrants right now. And he's trying to avoid Beto O'Rourke taking his seat. Now, Abbott's taken a hard stance toward immigration, barring entry for those coming from Mexico. He recently signed a directive to use the Texas National Guard to regulate the borders. And it's his most aggressive policy toward immigration along the border. This is what CBS News says. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott on Thursday authorized state officials and National Guardsmen to arrest migrants who enter the US unlawfully and transport them to federal ports of entry along the border with Mexico. The latest escalation in his feud with the Biden administration over immigration policy. Abbott signed a directive purporting to give the Texas National Guard and Department of Public Safety the authority to apprehend migrants who enter the US in between ports of entry or commit other violations of federal law. The order also empowered state officials to return these migrants to ports of entry, which are administered by US Customs and Border Protection. That's that federal agency there. Now, Abbott, he may be taking these draconian measures because recent events really have set him back in the polls, putting him ahead of O'Rourke at only 6 points now, which as far as I'm concerned is good, but it needs to be better in terms of O'Rourke getting the lead, hopefully. And from Inside Politics, we know that Republican strategists believe that current debates over gun control, abortion, and borders are really shrinking Governor Greg Abbott's lead over O'Rourke. And as these conversations continue to go on in Texas about who is going to take the helm, it's something that we need to pay attention to, because as we've seen when it comes to Texas attacking abortion rights, that this state can truly have a ripple effect over the rest of the nation. Jessica.
What Abbott says here is just a misrepresentation of what's happening. He enters this problem that he defines it's a problem. I don't think it's a problem, but about Mexican immigration into Texas. He says that the president of Mexico, Lopez Obrador, is the one that's sending people. That's absolutely not happening. Presidents don't want their working population to leave their country. Is the president of Mexico sending them or giving them permission? Absolutely not. And his endorsement of Beto isn't going to lead to more immigrants coming into Texas. And even if you are someone who is actually worried about Mexican immigration into Texas, a closed border policy has proven to actually lead to more Mexican immigrants. Before we adopted very strict border control policies, we had circular immigration. People were coming up from Mexico over the border to work during the summer months and going back home in the winter months. They weren't starting families. It was mostly men who were coming in to work for the season in the United States. And 85% of them were leaving that were coming in, which leaves net immigration at about 15%. We know a lot of people are coming up through other countries as refugees through the Mexican border. Not all of them are from Mexico, but when you consider actually net immigration, that's an important figure, because as soon as we close the border, people were scared to leave out of fear that they might not ever be able to come back. So they were bringing their wives, they were starting families in the United States. So really what this is about for them is not about controlling, immigration in any reasonable way because they're worried about how it impacts the economy. They're really just racist and using this as a talking point to get votes, and it's an empty one.
Yeah, absolutely, it's empty. And the thing is that people, I really feel like the United States has set up this narrative about Mexico, trying to make it seem like it is this bad place that you don't want to go and it doesn't take care of its people, so on and so forth. And it just seems to be the furthest thing from the truth, because the reality is that people do want jobs. And so maybe people will cross the border to work and then return, as you had mentioned, Jessica. But we also have to realize, like, Mexico has universal health care. Like, I remember when I passed out at the Mexico City airport, I got all the care I wanted, and then they sent me on my way without issue. It was kind of nice. But also too, there's a lot of opportunities there. And the thing is that the US continues to really contract when it comes to progress. It is regressive in some sort. So as much as it may have some jobs available for people, the reality is if we continue along the path that we're on, where we are boxing people out, where we are limiting people's rights, we are not going to grow in a way that would be good for our GDP, for workers, or for even opportunity. And so we also just may see fewer people trying to immigrate here by virtue of the fact that it really is not that great of a country anymore, which is too incredibly sad given the fact that I'd say, used to be a world leader. But those are just my thoughts. Any closing words on this, Jessica?
Yeah, I think it's just concerning that we even see Abbott as a viable candidate when he's running on this kind of a platform, that it's really about racism and race for them. Every single far right candidate is using fear-mongering tactics of these people, who live in the same place that they grew up in. They haven't seen a lot of people who look different from them, and they're afraid of change, reasonably so. But the right people to be angry at are not immigrants coming into the United States to work or for any reason. It's very clear that the people they should be angry at are the politicians who are not using our public resources for public good. You're absolutely right that other countries that have universal health care, if the immigration or migration was circular, they wanted to live in Mexico. That's where they wanted their primary residence to be. They didn't want to be Americans. And there's a reason for that. And the real change that we need to see in the United States, and the reason we see our communities in trouble, is not immigrants, it's our elected officials governing on behalf of corporations and not using our public resources to provide public goods to the taxpayers and the people who have a right to public funds.
Absolutely. We need to support our people without a doubt. And hopefully there will be change, and hopefully the people of Texas will get it together and elect a leader who is there to support them.